This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show. Well, as we speak, there are demonstrators, anti-independence, pro-Spanish demonstrators gathering in Barcelona, and that, of course, follows the scenes we saw on Friday night. We saw a declaration of independence, a universal declaration of independence from Carles Puigdemont, the Catalan president, and that on the day when the Spanish Senate voted to sack the entire Catalan parliament and its president and the region's autonomy, and they're going to move in this week, apparently, and take over. So it is a situation that is worrying, potentially. What happens when police or troops or whatever it is move in to take over government buildings? Are there going to be rings of protesters outside trying to stop them? Will the police, will the civil service take orders from Madrid? No one knows the answers to any of those things. And certainly, the comment that I've been making about this is that this Catalonia situation is Mr. Juncker's worst nightmare. And to my surprise, he rather acknowledged that yesterday when he said that there are some serious cracks showing in the European Union. We don't want them and we don't need them. So I'm going to have a debate this morning with you about whether, given all the things that have happened, given the way the police behaved on the 1st of October, with 900 people reportedly being injured by them as they were stopped from going to vote in what was an illegal referendum because it didn't have the sanction from the National Parliament. But do you now feel perhaps just a little bit more sympathy with the Catalan separatists? And that's what I want to discuss this morning. And I'm going to go straight to Catalonia and speak to the National Secretary of the Catalan National Assembly. It's a membership organisation. They've got 80,000 members. They are for the independence of Catalonia and more broadly for Catalan-speaking peoples. Montse Daban is indeed their National Secretary. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Hi, everybody.
Good morning. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I'm keen to know what happens tomorrow, in your opinion? I mean, they've said, Madrid, they've made it clear they're going to take over the civil service. They're going to take over, the chief of police has been sacked. They're going to take over the police force. What happens when they physically come in tomorrow and try and do that, in your opinion?
Okay, there's two scenarios. The first scenario is that the police use the forces as they did on October the 1st. But this is a clear red line expressed already by the President of the European Parliament, the European Union, Mr. Donald Tusk. He said, no crossing this red line. So we really hope that is not going to happen. And then the other thing is that since President Puigdemont is election on 27th September 2015, and there's a parliament that has majority to and presented to these elections with this program of independence in 18 months. What the president did is comply with the mandate that they got from the ballots, and then that's why the society, the population, these 2 million people that expresses every time on the streets and on the ballots that we want independence, we are ready to protect peacefully, as we always do, democratically, and in the most peaceful way, our institutions and our elected officials.
Well, your point about peaceful protest, and I saw a couple of MEPs saying, look, we are taking the Gandhi approach, that whatever they do to us, we will not respond with violence. And I saw that and thought, wow, that really is very appealing. And yet, I have to put it to you that one of your own senior officials, Jordi Sanchez, is currently in prison. He's been arrested, but he's been arrested on charges that he did use violence and did destroy police vehicles.
Well, this is what the Spanish government affirms, but if you see the videos that have already presented as evidences to the national audience, the High Court, the video showed exactly the opposite, and these are evidences not used. The whole procedure lacks guarantees all around it, and there's many spots with this lacking of guarantees. And most of these charges are based on falses.
Okay, so you deny. You deny that violence was used.
And actually, let me just mention that they are kept as hostages for this process. So they are political prisoners, not imprisoned because of any violent action, but because they are the peaceful leaders of two organizations that promote independence in Catalonia.
Okay, now you talked about your president, Carles Puigdemont, and you said he is the president of the Constitution. He is legally no longer the president of Catalonia. And I'm just thinking to myself, how does a sensible, peaceful conclusion to all of this come? Now, the Rajoy, the Spanish Prime Minister, has announced a set of elections on the 21st of December. Do you recognise those elections as being legitimate?
First, I will answer the three questions actually I detect in your question.
Yeah.
The first is that the constitutional law, the Spanish constitution, has been transgressed by the Spanish government many times. First, because it's the law intended to be applied in Catalonia is intended to be applied by a government that has broken the constitution in terms of its corruption activities, and it's trying to hide everything that has been doing so far in this area by hiding, strengthening the hate towards Catalonia. So first, there's a government breaking its own rules many times. Second, the 155 they're trying to apply goes farther than what is intended in the Constitution. So there's also another breaking of the Constitution in that term. So this is not constitutional, the application of the 155.
Okay, I mean, that's at the heart. That's at the heart of this debate and this argument. But what I'm asking you is, he has put forward these elections. Do you see these as legitimate elections in which you can prove to the world that there is a democratic majority for separating from Spain?
Okay. Yes, I'm going to answer that, but first I wanted to state that your major, it was not true. I was denying the major. But okay, about the elections, we expect the government to decide what to do, and we still haven't heard the leading parties on that regard. What we say is that considered the same as the Spanish government tries to implement them as autonomous, a region within Spain elections, that is not possible at all because we are not anymore a region inside Spain. Maybe another possibility we've seen in the media today is consider that constitutive elections or a substitute for referendum. We expect the leading parties to inform on that regard, but never we would accept as a society autonomous elections anymore.
Right, so you don't accept those elections. Fine. Would you accept if the Spanish government came back and said, OK, we need to settle this once and for all. We give you our permission to hold a full referendum done on a free and fair basis and that both sides accept the result. Would you accept that?
We understand that despite the fact that our parliament has an absolute majority elected by the people, and the parliament had this mandate, we accept that at the eyes of the world, the more affirmations we have on that regard, the better. So we could envisage the possibility of having a referendum, an agreed referendum. But this has to be explained very well to the society because we have already passed that page. We are on another page now. Well, so if we are correctly explained, but only an agreed referendum, not any more autonomous elections.
No. And how do you view the European Union's involvement in this since the 1st of October?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, I mean, after what happened on the 1st of October, we saw the Deputy President of the European Commission saying that he thought necessary force had been used and that the Spanish police had done the right thing. I just wondered what your attitude towards the European Union was in the wake of those comments.
We understand that one thing is Europe and the European Union, and another thing is the current leaders that can be answering to certain pressures that we know that have been performed by the Spanish government. So we understand that seeing Mr. Dusty is trying to say that all we saw in the world was a fake or fake images. We understand that they may be tricked, but at the end of the day, they have to know that we have 1,000 people injured by the Spanish police, and Europe can no longer admit that. So we expect them to have another attitude towards 7.5 million European citizens that are claiming for attention and a resolution. Okay,
listen, I'm going to say thank you very much indeed. Montse Daban, the General Secretary there of the Catalan National Assembly Organisation. Thank you for doing that interview. Well, folks, you can see the positions on this are pretty intransigent. She was pretty much saying that she won't accept the legitimacy of elections that have been called by Rajoy, the Prime Minister of Spain, but that perhaps a final referendum that is agreed by both sides, seen to be conducted on a free and fair basis, just might, be the solution to what are clearly wholly intransigent positions. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 10:15. The Spanish Senate has voted to remove autonomy from Catalonia, to sack the parliament, to sack the president and hold fresh elections on December the 21st. But we heard with our first interview of the day with the Catalan National Assembly Organisation, a big campaigning group in the region, that they don't accept that, and they think that actually they still have their autonomy. In fact, they think actually they're now independent because they declared it after a vote in their own assembly on Friday. So clearly deeply intransigent positions. And joining me now for a neutral view on this is Jim Kent, the owner of Barcelona City FM, who's lived in Barcelona for over 2 years and is a previous guest on this show. Jim, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel.
Well, I have to say that my interview, which I don't know whether you heard, with Montse Daban of the Catalan National Assembly, left me thinking that whilst the Catalan separatists may have had a vote in the parliament with a majority and may have had their president declaring UDI, that somehow they're going to have to do quite a bit more than that to convince the international community.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. This journey has only just started for the nationalists. Today, as you mentioned in your news bulletin, the focus is on a pro-unity demonstration, and
yes.
I've already seen people on the metro system here in their Spanish flags, and some of them even look potentially prepared for trouble, wearing helmets and masks, etc. And it is fair to say that the pro-Spanish side tends to be a coalition of groups, some of which are rather right-wing, of a fascist origin, and come into Barcelona for the occasion. So let's hope that doesn't evolve, but there is the potential for that later on today.
Yes, and I guess on the other side of the argument, Jim, if the police and army move in and try and take over government buildings on Monday, there's also the possibility that Catalan separatists may try and stop them from doing so.
Yes, indeed. We did hear news that the Catalan separatists might try and barricade government buildings. Yeah. Many of the local government ministers intended to go to work as usual, and then the local supporters said, yes, well, we are here to support you and prevent this new installation of a new team coming from Madrid. I should also mention one point here is that some Catalans are also a little critical of some parts of the press, some parts of the international press, including the British press, saying that the British press is swallowing the propaganda being served to it by Madrid. Somebody said to me that if any nation should appreciate when the will of the people is asking to leave a greater trading area, it's the
British. Yeah, no, I understand that. Although that was how the people voted, Jim. I'm afraid the political establishment don't necessarily feel the same way about that referendum result. No, I mean, look, we've seen the European Union, we've seen the British government, we've seen everybody saying they don't recognise the events in Barcelona last Friday, and I do think they have much further to go to convince people. What I'm fascinated by is whether these elections on the 21st of December will effectively be boycotted by the separatists, or whether they will try and use it as an opportunity to show their legitimacy. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I put exactly that question to various Catalans over the last 24 hours, and their initial reaction was, If there's an opportunity to vote, we want to engage with that. We do believe in democracy. We want to express a view. However, we do want to follow the lead of Carlos Puigdemont as well. So if he makes a decision to boycott them, as he may well do, as you heard in your previous interview, if these are just autonomous elections, effectively, people now are fiercely reacting against the sense of Madrid imposing elections. If these are actual constitutional elections here where Catalonia is deciding its own fate, you'll find people will support it far more readily. So if there's any sense of a Madrid imposition, expect people possibly not to engage with the process.
And my firm view is the only way this gets resolved at all, in any way, is that both sides agree, both sides consent, rather than having elections, to having a referendum on this issue, early next year, let's say, and that both sides say they're prepared to accept the result. I mean, am I right in thinking that, or would that of itself maybe not be the end of it?
No, I believe that would be the end of it, and that would be the question you should pose to Mariano Rajoy himself and ask him, why has he not done that? Why won't he give the people of Catalonia a chance to express that view? And the real honest answer is he would worry about losing the vote. But
well, Jim, if he comes to the European Parliament in Strasbourg, as a group leader there, I promise you, I will ask him that very question. Jim Kent, owner of Barcelona City FM, previous guest of the show, thank you for coming on. I do strongly suspect that we may well be speaking to him again. So, OK, you've heard just how trapped and intransigent both sides are on this, and I thought it was quite alarming to hear that people coming in on the metro system today with masks, helmets, violence may not be very far away. But given all that's happened over the course of the last month, do you now have more sympathy with the Catalan separatists? And if you do, and think they've been treated very badly, call me on 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think Spain actually is right to take back control, that the Catalonians have acted, or their leadership have acted, frankly, illegitimately, in which case you can text to 84850. Maybe you agree with me that surely a referendum is the only possible way forward to solve any of this, in which case, using the hashtag Farage and LBC, you can tweet at LBC, you can watch us on Facebook from here in the London studios and comment there too. And Ernie from Chiswick has called me. Ernie, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Thanks for taking the call. First of all, I disagree with most of your politics, but to be fair, you've never, ever written books or said that your DNA is superior to other people of Europe, etc., etc. I'm just trying to enlighten your viewers, your listeners,
Yeah.
But the Catalan nationalists have been for decades, making speeches about their DNA being superior, different to the rest of Spain, etc., etc. So this has fermented a fear amongst the Spanish-speaking population of Catalonia, which on a sunny or cloudy day is about 3 million. So I think you need to take that on board.
Yes.
Whilst there is a Falanges hangover in Madrid, and that's my country of origin. Originally, I'm from born in Gibraltar, raised in Andalusia. Equally, the Catalan bourgeoisie knows exactly what it was stirring. And I think it's very comfortable, you and me, on a Sunday morning, having a chat about Spain, but Spain is not England. And the West is always saying how it regrets getting involved in Iraq and Syria. Now, I'm not comparing Spain with that, but Spain is not England. Spain's democracy is in its nappies. If anything, I think Madrid needs help from Europe to try and resolve this in a different way, because it didn't help Spain in 36 and 39, as you know.
But Ernie,
step back.
But Ernie, you said yourself. You said yourself that you were born in Gibraltar. I mean, Spain is supposed to be a modern democracy, and I get your point that it may not have a long tradition of this, but just look at the way Spain treats Gibraltar on a weekly basis in terms of obstructionism at the border. And Ernie, can you imagine how the rest of the world looks at the police force being used to prevent people from going out and expressing an opinion on Sunday morning and wounding nearly 1,000 people?
If Nigel, if the rest of the world were to study Catalonia's social history the last 20, 30 years, being a Spanish-speaking person in someone like Hospitalet de Llobregat, which is a Spanish-speaking area, you encounter suffer racism on a daily basis. That's never been reported. If you were a Spain national top on a different day of the week, you're in big trouble in some parts of Catalonia. And the nationalism that has been spurned on the people by their nationalist leader Jordi Pujol. You can look him up on the internet. He's the godfather of modern day Catalan nationalism. Wrote a famous book in the 50s saying that the Andalusian male, which is region of southern Spain, is half-baked and archaic. I've never, and as much as I disagree with your politics, I've never heard you.
No, and nor would I. So, Ernie, what you're saying is there is a strain of this Catalan nationalism that has been around for a long time, that is about racial superiority,
Yes,
and is deeply unpleasant, yeah?
Yeah, and it's never ever mentioned. And I just want to put it, but having said that, I agree with you. It is a bit of a mess. I don't know where we're going to go from here, but I think what is lacking in the news is how Spain should be congratulated for taking the democracy on from Franco. It got a bit of help then. I think we just need one more push-up from everyone.
Well, it's 40 years ago, but Ernie, listen, thank you. Ernie making a point there. He's saying his view from his experience of Spain is that there are elements within Catalan nationalism that are deeply, deeply unpleasant. Equally, on the other side, we heard Jim Kent telling us that there are pro-Spanish fascists, dressed up in paramilitary gear, effectively, coming into town today. Could well be both sides are as bad as each other. Joel is calling from Cambridge. Joel, you're half Catalan, I believe.
Yes, hi Nigel, that's correct. I'm half Catalan, half English.
Yep.
I was born in Barcelona, English mother, Catalan father.
Yep.
Lived there 25 years, but have spent most of my life between the UK and Catalonia.
Mm-hmm.
So my view, obviously, is slightly, I can't answer your direct question of, has things changed my view, but I can tell you that 20 years ago, my grandfather would be talking about independence and how, the Catalan sentiment affected or triggered the civil war with Spain and how they weren't allowed to even name their children certain names. Or my father himself, when he did the military service, got a gun put to his head for speaking Catalan. So obviously there was a huge repression on the Catalan identity.
Yep.
And but still, even so, once democracy kicked in and the constitution, which we all knew wasn't a perfect constitution, by any means, it wasn't like a modern country constitution, but it's what we call the transition constitution, something that would allow us to move on in a democracy where the fascists and the dictators, or those that were close to dictator Franco, would not be harmed. And while everybody else would, more or less be able to move on. Now, 10 years ago, the sentiment for independence, the support for independence was probably just only around 10%.
It was. That's right.
Not much more than that. And Catalans, through democratic processes, tried to gain more independence, just like they did in the Basque Country. But instead of using violence, they did it in a pacific way. And because of that, they achieved much less.
Yes, and at the moment, I have to say, the previous interview today, when I asked her the question, had her organisation contained some violent people within it, I didn't really get an answer. But overall, Joel, if you were voting, let's say there was a referendum in a few months' time, and given your Catalan heritage, you had a vote in that, which way would you vote now?
Oh, well, I can answer very simply. We are not going to vote because we already consider ourselves an independent country.
All right, fine. Joel, you've taken that view. I thank you very much. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show. It's 10:31. Well, the Catalonians insist they've declared independence and that's it. It's all over. Our previous caller very much echoing that view at the end of the conversation. But actually, truth is, they haven't really, have they? Because if they want the rest of the world to recognise their independence, they're going to have to go a lot further than this. But, on the other hand, Madrid is seen by many to have behaved pretty appallingly, and their friends and supporters in the European Union too. And I'm asking you whether, after the events of the last month, you have more sympathy with the Catalan separatists. But before that, if you want a really good laugh and a proper example of what the Donald would call fake news, just have a little look at this today. Trump, Assange, Bannon, Farage bound together in an unholy alliance. And this is in today's Observer, and it would appear that I am the bagman. I'm the one running messages and exchanging information between the President of the USA and Julian Assange. I am the bag man. Let me just tell you, this is a complete lot of baloney. I have said it before. I will say it again. The reason that I met Julian Assange was because somebody at LBC organised it. And not only that, when I went to meet Julian Assange, I took with me my producer from LBC. If I was running some special mission for the US president, do you really think I'd have taken an LBC presenter with me? Unless, of course, LBC are part of the conspiracy. Perhaps that's what we'll read next Sunday. No, we won't, because they're not. But I just want to say, sometimes people in their own heads conflate the fact that somebody has met somebody who's met somebody, and it must be a grand conspiracy, and it very, very rarely is. Now, back to Catalonia. Lots of you piling in with your comments. How telling that your Catalan guest ducked the question about whether the separatists would accept the results of the new regional elections called for December 21st. The reason is plain and simple. They know they are in a minority and would lose. So much for them being the champions of democracy, says Maura, who's writing in from Chiswick. It is hypocritical of the UK not to recognise Catalonia. The people were brutalised for expressing a democratic view. After all, we did the same with Brexit, says Chris. Come on, Nigel, Catalonia. Let's not get carried away with the romance of revolution. Where is the democratic process? One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, says Dan in Southampton. And Jen says on Facebook, Spain are frankly, like the EU, they're only interested in the money they can get from Catalonia and not the people. And that is what speaks volumes. Well, in terms of money, Catalonia is 20% of Spain's gross domestic product. So it is, in terms of its production, the most powerful economic part of Spain at the moment in terms of the regions. And of course, there are many there that say, look, we are subsidising people in the south who don't work as hard as us. I mean, seriously, they are arguments that are being heard. If it was a separate nation, actually, its GDP would be a lot bigger than over 100 countries in the world. So economically, is it big enough and viable enough to be a state? Yes. My view is this. Ever since the ending of the First World War, we have recognised internationally the principle of national self-determination. In fact, so much so that it's written into Chapter 1 of the United Nations Charter and Resolutions. And it says the UN Charter is to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples. And I think that the only way we can solve this is for both sides to accept that it has to be a big, free and fair referendum and the Catalan people decide, just as in many ways David Cameron did that with the people of Scotland. We had a referendum and frankly now I think it really is a bit of a settled issue. Albeit the one big difference is that the Scottish national position from their party was that they would be fully part of the European Union if they left the United Kingdom. Well, what's becoming pretty clear in Catalonia is there is against the European Union the leaders of these movements as they are against the leadership from Madrid. So do I have more sympathy personally for the Catalan cause than I did a month ago? Actually, the answer to that is yes, I do. I think the way the international community have ganged up and tried to crush them, I think it's absolutely monstrous. I think Frans Timmermans' comments, and don't forget he's Juncker's number 2 in the European Commission, where he basically said, look, the rule of law had to be applied, necessary force was used. I thought it was a monstrous comment. And a comment made by a European Union who, as Juncker himself has said, the cracks are beginning to show. And Catalonia breaking away would frankly make Brexit look like a Sunday afternoon picnic. John from Formby is calling me. Good morning, John.
Yes, good morning.
So do we feel more sympathy now for the Catalan separatists than we did a month ago?
Yes, absolutely. There's 2 points I'd like to make. The first one is a general one. That there seem to be winds of change throughout Europe. There is fragmentation. We've seen Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia go. Mm-hmm. And there's talk in Belgium of a split between the Dutch speakers and the Walloons. And of EU's project of a unified Europe. It all seems to be breaking up.
One of the odd things, John, about your point is that for at least 25 years, one of the things the European Union tried to do was to have a very strong regional policy, to encourage regionalism, because I genuinely think they believed if people felt as regions they had a big say in the European Union, it would actually detach them from their sense of national belonging. But now it appears with Catalonia, it's started to go back the other way.
Yes, well, that seems to be a classic divide and rule tactic.
Yes, exactly.
But the second point I would make is that I won't be convinced about Catalonian independence until I'm convinced that the majority of Catalans want it. And therefore I agree with you that there has to be a referendum, and that the handling of the affair by the Spanish government has been repressive, and it brings back memories of Hitler's Anschluss with Austria. Same sort of tactics.
Well, it's certainly, there are all sorts of unpleasant historical analogies we could use with what apparently is going to happen in Barcelona and elsewhere over the course of the next couple of days. John from Formby, I thank you. And yeah, you know, they held their referendum, their illegal referendum under Spanish national law, and they got 92% to vote for independence, for separation, but on a 43% turnout. Imagine if this was the referendum that mattered and the turnout was 85%. Who knows? I can't predict which way this would go. All I've felt ever since October the 1st is that a lot of fair-minded people who might be in the middle would look at the way that Spain particularly had behaved and think, you know what, the hell with you, we'll go on our own. I suspect that if the Spanish had not behaved, the national Spanish government had not behaved the way they did on the 1st of October, I'm not sure, frankly, we'd even be having this discussion, because I think internationally then, the separatists would be seen to be making an argument from a minority point of view without any legitimacy. It is the fact that they can now say, we are the wounded party, that I think has played into their hands. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 10:45. Do we feel more sympathy for the Catalan cause over what's happened in the course of the last month? Rosario on Facebook doesn't, and says the law is the law. If you defy the law, you know what happens, and that's what's gone on in Catalonia. Well, yes, but there is this thing called the UN and the principle of national self-determination. Surely people's voice ought to be heard. Barry says on Facebook, what happens if Catalonia has a referendum and votes to be independent? Will it be accepted? Well, Barry, that's the point, isn't it? That Rajoy, the Prime Minister of Spain, needs to say that we will have this referendum and we will accept the result. And in that case, yes, they would be independent. But Barry, it's by no means certain that those who want separation, those who want independence would win. It is by no means certain. But I cannot see how you could end this argument unless you go down that route. Helen says, I agree that a referendum should be allowed. Kerry says the EU will mobilise an army of Remainers to demonstrate Spanish unity in Barcelona. They might, Kerry, but that could go the other way, it seems to me. Martin is calling me from Balham. Good morning, Martin. What's your view?
Hey, Nigel, I was a Remainer. I'd never found myself saying this, but I totally agree with you on 2 points. First of all, you're completely free to meet whoever you want. If that's the President of the United States or Julian Assange, you're a free citizen. That's
very sweet of you. Thank you. Very good. Okay.
My second point is that the Catalan situation, although we're on other sides of the EU conundrum, I think the EU is in a real pickle here. I say that because from Tusk's perspective, he can't support Spain breaking up, because if you let Spain break up, the Belgians are going to follow, the Italians are going to follow. They had regional referendums last week, as you know, for more regional autonomy. And there's a lot of groundswell pressure in Europe for regional identity. So the EU's damned if it does, damned if it doesn't.
Well, Martin, there's one slight difference. That when the Scottish referendum was taking place, what was clear to me in the European Parliament is they all wanted Scotland to vote to leave the United Kingdom because Alex Salmond was so fanatically pro being part of the European Union and for years had supported joining the euro currency. The difference here, Martin, fragmentation is tougher to manage, but the real difference here is that there's a strong strain within the Catalan independence movement that is totally opposed to the European Union. So in a way, it poses a mortal threat, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, what's going to happen if there's riots on the streets of Barcelona again and people get hurt, and then we have a civil war in Europe? What's the EU going to do then?
Well, I don't know, Martin, but I felt... I mean, I tell you what I think about the European Union, and OK, we're at this from different angles, but when it comes to anything the Polish government does, they intervene and comment and criticise. Anything the Hungarian government does, they intervene, comment and criticise. Anything the British government does, they don't like over the years. They intervene, comment, take us to court and all the rest of it. And yet here is a so-called modern-day democracy injuring nearly 1,000 people. They said nothing. And I challenged Juncker directly on this in the European Parliament. I said, you haven't said a dicky bird on this. And then when they do say something, they say necessary force was used. And they appear, Martin, to me, as a leaver, but they appear to me to put European integration as a process above any sense of morally what is right or wrong.
As a Remainer, I would say Europe is about liberties, and that's why I think they should have condemned the state action.
Yeah.
Spain.
Is it possible, Martin, that the European Union is a less pleasant place than you thought it was during the referendum?
Well, Nigel, I believe sharing is caring, and I believe in reform of the EU. I think we've got a bad political leadership in the centre, which needs to be more listening to the concerns of voters in Europe and needs to change. But for me, that wasn't a reason to leave. But
no, sure. OK, but Martin, overall, do you feel more sympathy with the Catalans now than you did a month ago?
Yes.
Splendid. Thank you very much indeed. Bruce is calling from Henley. Bruce, good morning.
Very good morning to you. I had a little moment when I've just realised what the M25 is, and I'd like to get your feelings on this, Nigel.
Yep.
The M25 is in fact a cutting guide, how we can remove London and Greater London from the rest of the UK, get a few English-built tugs, drag us to a slightly warmer climate, maybe next to Barcelona. We can link up together as two great industrial powerhouses, financial powerhouses, and start doing our own trade deals, purely on the basis that, as we all know, economically, if you're further away from doing trade, it costs you more to do it. So, I know it's a great idea doing business with New Zealand. However, it takes a little bit longer for goods to get here and so on. So us Londoners, you're lovely geezer, Nigel, but we kind of want it to stay there. So I'm just trying to find a happy medium between our two outlooks.
Difference is that whilst London may have different social attitudes to areas just 50 miles beyond it, and whilst London may have considerably higher incomes than those that live outside of it, I've never heard a serious argument that says that London should declare UDI or the rest of the country should ditch London. I think pretty much in England we're a pretty united nation, aren't we?
No, I'm not suggesting UK. I suggest us Londoners we move away.
No. So you want London to declare UDI, yeah?
We don't have the same demographic as the rest of the UK. We don't have the same segregation that you see and the difference of attitudes because we're all layered upon each other and got on with life and business is open 24/7.
But ultimately, Bruce, if you ask people in Bolton or Sheffield, just as you ask them in London, what is their identity, they will say English-British, won't they?
I totally agree with you, but they've also been fed a load of codswallop by individuals in the Brexit that then just did the off afterwards when they went through the referendum. Not pointing any fingers, Nigel.
Who did the off, Bruce? Bruce, some of you guys out there, hang on to these myths. Michael Gove is currently running agriculture and fisheries, albeit with a little local difficulty to sort out after yesterday. Boris Johnson is the foreign secretary, and I'm still leading a group in the European Parliament. None of us did the off, but I thank you for your call. John is calling from Germany. Is it Gütersloh? Is that how I pronounce it, John?
It's Gütersloh.
OK, well, I got that wrong. But never mind. Good morning to you.
Good morning. The Catalan independence movement are doomed. They've gone off showboating any sympathy anybody might have had. They appeal to their own support base, nobody else. They got a platform in that Catalan parliament and have used it to claim credibility, gone off organising this referendum.
Yep.
There's going to be another election. Spain has moved in. The vast majority of people will turn up for that election in December, and they will be crushed and removed from that parliament. That's what's going to happen here. I appreciate you're quite right. If they had been able to agree a mutually agreed independence referendum with Spain, that every party could have agreed. But it's gone beyond that now, Nigel.
Do you think, John, that these elections will solve the problem then?
It will solve the problem technically in short term. There'll no doubt be rumblings from the Catalans, from the Catalan independence movement thereafter. But really, they put the national government into a corner with it. They did handle it badly, the national government, which hasn't helped the situation. But
I don't doubt, John, for a minute. I don't doubt for a minute that the Catalans were very provocative in holding that referendum, as they've been provocative in declaring UDI. I don't doubt that. But all the while, they are seen to be peaceful and decent. And I have to be honest, looking at those images of people in the square in Barcelona on Friday night, they did appear to be decent and reasonable. All the while they maintain the higher moral side of the argument, the more sympathy I think ordinary folk will have for them. But you may well be right, John. You know, and other people have made this point, that it may well be that actually Puigdemont, you know, claiming he has a majority is actually false. I have more sympathy for them than I had a month ago, but I certainly wouldn't recognise them as an independent state yet. They haven't proved their legitimacy. So I agree with that point, John, completely, and I thank you for your call. Can we stop speaking about Catalans and say the independents? They are only a part of the population. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We must be very careful about that. There are, you know, people living in Catalonia strongly on both sides of the argument. Would Spain want to hang on to Catalonia if they were poor? Unlike Scotland, they are not subsidised by Madrid, says Julia. Actually, yes, they would. They fear the integrity of Spain. They fear it breaking up. And my last caller on this subject this morning is Rudy, who's calling from Exeter. Good morning.
Yeah, hi, Nigel. My point is this, right? Whether you agree with them or not, they're supposed to be in a democratic union, which obviously we know they're not. So they should have the right to have their say in their vote. And if they're so sure that the majority of the people would stay to be part of Spain, then why are they frightened of having a referendum? And why were they actually stopping the ballot boxes on the previous time back in October? You know,
Rudy, I think you make a perfectly fair point, a perfectly fair point. And Rudy, the point is that the United Nations Charter and resolutions make it clear that people are entitled to national self-determination, and it appears that Spain wants to stop them from doing that. And finally, Rudy, just very quickly, you know, if you were Catalan now, which way would you vote?
I'd vote to leave, because the thing is this, right? What people are not asking, with all these politicians that want to remain, and it's the same in the UK, what's in it for them? Point two, if being a part of the EU is so fantastic, why are most of the countries on their knees, and why do they all want to come to Britain?
Well, there you go, Rudy from Exeter, I thank you. That's the end of that conversation. Looking ahead, a Conservative Member of Parliament has written to all the UK universities demanding a list of professors who were teaching students about Brexit, and there's been a big backlash from the academics. Is it right for this MP to question how Brexit is being taught? If you think yes, Brexit should be taught without any prejudice, call me on 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think it's right that teachers and lecturers give their own opinions on Brexit, in which case text to 84850. If you're a student, tweet me using the hashtag Farage and LBC, at LBC. Tell us how you're being taught, and of course you can watch the show live by going to LBC's Facebook page and commenting there too.